Episode 98 of the podcast. This week we're talking about discipline. What does it really mean, and do we need to use it in grooming? In the second part, we're going to talk about cookies. Don't blame the cookie. We're going to talk about treats and how they're supposed to be used. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. This weekend, I was reminded of the use of discipline. Chrissy, what about discipline? Don't we need to discipline the dogs? We talk about all the other aspects of training, but what about discipline? And that is such a good question. So I looked up the definition of discipline. The definition is the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior using punishment to correct disobedience. The practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior. And then to punish to correct disobedience. So then I looked up disobedience, right? We're going down the rabbit hole. But disobedience, that's failure or refusal to obey rules or someone in authority. Again, that rules thing. So we have the practice of training people to obey rules, and disobedience is refusal to obey rules. So now what's the definition of a rule? And I know some of us are like, oh, come on, really, Chrissy, you're going to go through with like what a rule is? But let's really think about it. One of a set of explicit or understood regulations or principles governing conduct within a particular activity or sphere. Explicit or understood regulations. So before we discipline a dog, we have to teach them the rules. They can't be disobedient if they don't know what we're doing, if they don't understand what's happening. So it's not about avoiding discipline, right? I mean, you guys know I pretty much am in the reinforcement sphere. I would rather teach the dogs exactly what we want them to be doing. It's I think sometimes people start thinking you're lovey-dovey puppy mama if you aren't really keen on using discipline. My problem with discipline and grooming is the dogs are acting up most of the time because they're afraid or they're frustrated and they don't know what's going on. So if we do not have clear rules, explicit or understood rules for them to obey that they understand, then they can't be disobeying, right? So I want you to be thinking about that, like, because if we aren't teaching the rules, they can't choose to not follow them. And now we're setting up for something really unfair. And because we're using punishment, using a punishment, right? That's part of the definition of discipline, using a punishment to correct disobedience. Punishments are, by definition, something unpleasant, something the dog would like to avoid. That's how they decrease a behavior. So if the dog doesn't understand the rules, and now we're adding something unpleasant or removing something, and that removal is an unpleasant sensation on top of the unpleasantness of grooming, right? They still don't know the rules, and they're even more frustrated. Ooh, that's quite a thing, isn't it? So here's the thing. I find it's really easy for us to think in terms of, well, he needs discipline. And we need to crack down on this. Here's another example, one that I hear pretty often. And that one is, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Ooh, that's an interesting phrase, right? And we've all heard that. And I think that we can relate to that. But what does that really look like? How does that play out? What behaviors are we talking about? What do we see and observe that makes us say something like that? And what I find it usually means is that some dogs will try to scare you or try to pull away a lot, and they quickly learn which way you respond and if that works or not. It's communication. It's not manipulation. They're just like, well, what if I pull away this way? And if you do, they're like, good. Okay, we've got a thing going on here. I know if I twist my left foot and yelp, they'll let go, which is a great example because a lot of owners do that, right? The dog yelps and they're like, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, right? um, it's not that the dog is being manipulative. It's that the dog is really good at training people. Dogs read us very, very well. So if we're talking about things like if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, what I really think we're talking about is don't let them think it's okay. Don't let them think something is okay if it's not acceptable, if it's not within those boundaries. Because then you're entering this sort of social contract with a dog who's kind of got the brain of a toddler. You know, like if you tell a toddler like it's okay today and it's not okay tomorrow, they don't understand that. And I think a lot of dogs kind of fall into that, especially our young dogs. But a dog who's already kind of uncomfortable, getting a little bit frustrated, they're not at their best. And, I know I'm being anthropomorphic with comparing ages and comparing dogs to toddlers, but I will tell you, my last dog was 14 when she passed away. And those last couple of years, we were watching her and my nephew, who at the time was about 5, thinking, you know what? I think they have about the same kind of understanding of what the rules are. Like, I wouldn't trust either of them to cross the street on their own without, and look both ways, so even though she was a mature dog and very, very well trained, she was kind of as reliable as that 5-year-old kid. And I think we need to remember that. We need to remember that these dogs, even the most adult of dogs, is still kind of not really understanding all of our world. And if we're telling them that this is okay and then try to change the rules up, that's really frustrating. So if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. Yeah, it's kind of true. Sure. However, it doesn't mean that it's a bad dog. That doesn't mean that that's, a manipulative dog. That's just a dog being a dog. How else are they supposed to figure out what we want? By trying it out. They're going to try a whole bunch of things, and if something works for them, they're like, great. And that's why it's important for owners to know things. When we send owners home with something to work on, I'm going to kind of get off topic a little bit here, but one of the classic examples is, massage his feet. And I hear groomers saying it too. Do you guys give foot massages? Because I don't. I mean, maybe a little bit when I'm bathing and when I'm rinsing, but not really. So what we really want them to do is be touching feet with some sort of an awareness of how a foot would be touched and held and manipulated and held while standing and touched with stuff, right? So we need to have owners understand that, but we also need owners to know that if your dog is uncomfortable, we need to help them be comfortable, not yell at them and not just let go, because owners will default to no, no, no. It's like nails on a chalkboard. I have trouble even doing it. No. Or they just let go. Oh, okay. See, I've actually had people owners tell me, oh, he's wonderful for his feet. He knows he can trust me. I'm like, what does he do if you hold his foot longer than he wants you to? Like, why would I ever do that? Because that's literally what you're having problems with in the grooming shop. We don't just let go. Oh, never mind. Send him home. He didn't want to. So we need owners to know that you have to let the dog know what's allowed and what's not. And if you let them think it's okay, it's like, oh, he won't really bite you. He just likes to put his teeth on you. Yeah, that's not okay. So owners need to know that too. But give them an inch, they'll take a mile. I want you to really think about, what does that look like? The behavior that we observe, like strip it of its emotions, be a little bit more scientific, because we're observing something. We're seeing something. And what I think we are seeing is that if you let go when he yelps, or, if he licks your face and you giggle, lots of different things that dogs will try, if he puts his paw on you and you put the scissors down and you start patting him, he's like, oh, if I want a break, you know what? I think this paw trick will work really nice, and maybe some kisses and paw and kisses, which becomes really annoying if you're trying to get anything done. So these are some of the things that I hear about when people start talking about discipline. Okay. Here's another one. he needs to know who's in charge. I hear that a lot too. All right, guys, so what do you think about that one? What do we observe? What are we really seeing when we're saying something like he needs to know who's in charge? He needs to know that I'm in charge. So, first of all, I'm going to say he knows you're in charge. Does he though? Yeah, he really does. He gave up a lot of self-control, a lot of control just walking into your grooming shop. If he's on your table or if he's in your tub, right? He or she has already given up a whole lot of control. They know you're in charge. They get that. What we want them to do is that we want them to realize that it's safe while you're in charge. And when we're in charge, I think what some people are seeing too is people, when you're looking at another groomer and you're like, nah, I don't think she's really in charge, or he's not really in charge, is because we're kind of seeing someone who's getting frustrated or fighting for control. If you have to get into an argument or a fight with a dog, you weren't in charge. You were barely holding on. Right? And fighting for control sends a message that like, oh wait, this is up for grabs. There's an opportunity here for me to maybe take charge, right? So for as wishy-washy, sweet, kind I can be, those dogs still know I'm in charge. And that's okay. Because I am in charge, I own my space. It's something that you probably get more when you're working with the larger animals, the cows and the horses. You don't want them to think that they can push you around because they're so much larger and they will accidentally push you around. You just kind of own your space. So if you think about fighting for control, like anybody who actually is in the other side of the room saying, no, I'm in charge, that means you're kind of losing control over there. You're getting frustrated. Frustration reads really, really clearly to a dog because they're frustrated too. If you want someone to make you feel comfortable, you want someone who's calm and in charge, right? So if I were a dog on a grooming table and I was a little bit frustrated and I didn't know what was happening and someone was doing something really uncomfortable, I would want that someone that I've already given control, right? He's on your table. If I'm on your table, I've already given you control, right? I'm kind of a control freak. If I sit down in my dentist chair, I have implied that I am consenting to some of this, right? So I want you to be thinking that we need to be calmly in charge. It's not about being bossy. It's not about being loud. It's not necessarily about being stern. It's about being calmly in charge. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes and tell all of your friends. Let's talk a bit about treats. Groomers have a love-hate relationship with giving treats. So I'm going to first address one of the biggest concerns that people have about giving treats in a grooming shop. If treats are making the dog super silly or super wiggly or generally causing more behaviors that you don't want, it means that the dog needs to learn how to behave around treats, and we need to know how to deliver treats, how to manage treats. But we don't blame the cookie. The cookie is an inanimate object. It's not the food that's the problem. It's the lack of understanding or the lack of the dog's understanding, the lack of our own understanding, where we need to know, am I using it just to, keep him distracted while I'm getting something done? Because distractions backfire. I'm not a big fan of using distractions unless the dog knows something about what we're doing, right? A consenting distraction. Oh, I just opened a big can of worms there. So a consenting distraction is, for example, if I go and have the doctor draw blood, I'm fine with them drawing blood. I just can't watch. I'm kind of a big sissy about it. So I'll put my arm out and I'm looking for a distraction. Like I'm totally prepared they're going to do that to my arm. And I'm looking up like, oh, hey, those pictures of your kids, see any good movies lately? That's a consenting distraction. So if, for instance, I have to do something on my dog's paw, like let's say he has an injury to his paw, I might say, all right, I have to wrap this, and maybe someone else is petting him talking to him, distracting him from what I'm doing. That type of distraction. But if you're just putting out cookies and the dog's behavior is crazy, yeah, you're probably not sending a message that these cookies are a reward for a behavior. These cookies don't have any real feel for this is part of what we're doing. So it's not the cookie's fault. We need to stop blaming the cookie. The cookie is an inanimate object. And I gotta say, dogs can work with some pretty big distractions. My guys compete in flyball. If you've never seen flyball, it's very, very distracting. It's very, very loud. There are balls, dogs, people running around, toys, barking, and the dogs run off leash and stay on course most of the time. So dogs can handle distractions. But I want you to think, if we're planning on using treats, what plan are you acting on? That's interesting, right? Because if we're using them as part of a plan to change behavior, that's what we should be using treats for, right? We should be having a plan, right? So one use is for classical conditioning, and that's to pair things, one thing to another thing, like a grooming shop or being on a table or being in a tub or hearing equipment or seeing equipment being paired with treats, okay, or being paired with toys or being paired with something pleasant, to the point where they build an association with that thing and the thing it's paired with. Okay, pairing works by presenting the thing at a level the dog can handle and then adding treats. Thing first, followed by treat. Thing first, followed by treat. Thing, treat, till happy vibes happen, right? If the dog won't take a treat during that type of process, it was at a level where the dog wasn't comfortable. It was an experience that was too distracting, or perhaps the treats weren't interesting. And I think sometimes in grooming, they don't want to take a treat because they're already overwhelmed. They're already distracted. They're like, this is not cookie time. Not feeling the cookie vibe here. This isn't my thing right now. I'm a little apprehensive. So we can't blame the cookie, right? But if we're trying to pair, this experience with something yummy, that's an effective thing to try. My problem with treats is that we're already doing so much that managing treats also, sometimes you just feel like you need a third hand or a fourth hand, right? We've got a hand on the dog, we've got a hand on scissors, we're like picking up a comb with our scissor hand, we're like, I'm a house call groomer, so I have that small table that folds up. Sometimes I'm steadying the table with my foot while really, it's what we really need is more things in our hands. Like, no, it's more of a pain. But there are a lot of people who love treats, and groomers have a love-hate relationship with treats. So here is a second use for food, and that is when we watch for behaviors that we like and want to encourage and give a treat right after, directly after the good stuff. Directly after something good happens, okay? That can be done with or without a reward marker. And reward markers are things like the click of a clicker, good dog. When I'm grooming, I tend to use nice, just because I don't use good dog while I'm grooming most of the time, because there's a whole, I can really get on that one. When owners say good, they often mean you're done. So I find for a lot of dogs, it's distracting. You do one toe and you're like, good dog. And the dog's like, I'm done. See you next week. Bye-bye. Right? But if we're using food, we're watching for a behavior that we like and we want to encourage, and we give a treat directly after. Okay? That's part of a training plan. And that plan here in this example is we're training with the principle of positive reinforcement. Something added, which in this case was food, reinforcement, which is when we're trying to increase or maintain that good behavior that we added food for. All right. If the behavior is not staying the same or increasing, it is not reinforcement. It was just a cookie. Reinforcement is the measure of behavior change. It's not the emotion. It's not the giving of cookies. If to be reinforced is the behavior increases or stays the same. To be punished is the behavior would decrease. So if we're using treats to increase a behavior and that's not working, then we reevaluate our plan. But we don't blame the cookie. Stop blaming the cookie, right? There are reasons to not use food in the grooming shop, but the idea that like cookies are just too distracting for dogs or cookies don't work, yeah, I'm trying to debunk that a little bit here. So here is a third use for food. So this one often goes hand in hand with that positive reinforcement that we've set up, because the dog kind of needs to know that there's something good available that goes away. So let's say that you have treats on the counter and they're in view of the dog and you're using them to reward what you do want. Maybe that's scissoring around a foot. Okay, so you pick up the foot, scissor a little bit, nice, give a cookie. Pick up the foot, scissor a little bit, nice, give a cookie. Pick up the foot and the dog starts to wiggle away and you're like, whoops, pack up the cookies. Right? Like, wait, what where did the cookies go? There's no more opportunity for cookies, right? And that can be a big one. They're like, whoa, what? We were having a good time a minute ago. Removal of something, like taking treats away to discourage, lessen, decrease a behavior that we do not want, is actually negative punishment. Negative, take away, punishment, decrease behavior. However, it's a plan for negative punishment. It's only negative punishment if it effectively reduces the behavior that you didn't want. So I think what happens is we as groomers start seeing a plan and we're like, oh, I'm going to use it this way. And nope, it didn't work. But without really thinking, okay, so where did our plan maybe fall apart? Or maybe we're not using a plan at all. We're just like, I have cookies here and okay, sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't, and we're really kind of random. There are plenty of times I'm watching something and I'm like, the dog and I aren't real sure what your message is. You know, like I'm not any clearer on what your message is than the dog is. So when we're talking about using food, we need to have a plan. So be thinking about, what way am I going to use this food? Do I want to use it to encourage a behavior? Do I want to use it to create this happy vibe and pair it with something that they used to think was a little bit scary? Or perhaps something that's totally neutral. It's a great way to get a puppy used to some new stuff. Like, oh, I'm up on a table. That's totally neutral to me. I'm a puppy. I've never seen a table before. I get up on a table and treats appear. I get up on a table, treats appear. You know, I get in the tub, treats appear. These things are awesome, right? We're creating an association that these places are when yummy, happy things happen. So, like I said, groomers, we have a love-hate relationship with giving treats. But it's not because cookies are ineffective. It's because a lot of the time we don't have a good grasp on how to use those cookies, or we're getting the dogs way too excited, or we're giving cookies without really making it directly obvious when they earned that cookie, what they were doing, which is where reward markers are really helpful and no reward markers are really helpful. So reward marker, like I said, could be nice and give a cookie. Nice and give a cookie. And maybe not always give a cookie. And a no reward marker could be something as simple as, whoop, too bad. You know, it doesn't have to be a no. There are plenty of times where I want you to think where a dog is simply incorrect, not bad dog, incorrect. And that's where you would use something like a no reward marker. Maybe that should be next week's podcast, because that's a big can of worms I just opened up there. But let me give you an example. If my dogs are super excited and I call them over and I ask for a sit and they give me a down, right? That's incorrect. That's not, I'm ignoring you, or a bad dog, or, you know what I mean? Like there are times where we're simply incorrect, you know? Real quick, what's the capital of New Hampshire? Wrong. You know, like some of you got it, some of you didn't, right? What's the capital of Montana? You know? What does E equals MC squared mean? I don't remember, right? So think about it. There are times where we're simply incorrect, and that's different than bad. But it's important information. So if a dog is incorrect and we have a way to kind of go, whoops, and then food goes away and they're like, wait, whoa, I don't like that whoops thing. What just happened there? It does not have to be mean. And that's one of the things I hear from the positive reinforcement trainers who are super, super, super crazy positive reinforcement. I know that sounds so judgy, but there are some who are, wow, way over the top, that they feel that that's kind of cruel to use something like, whoops, too bad. I'm like, wow, that to me isn't cruel. I think it's okay to tell a dog when they have lost a privilege, when they are incorrect. So, like I said, I covered a lot of stuff today. But that relationship with treats, don't blame the cookie, right? Dogs can be really pretty good about cookies. Part of why I don't like using them is it's just really cumbersome to have to handle cookies also. And then you have the smell of cookies over your tools, over your workstation. If you're in a shop environment with other dogs, you don't know if these other dogs are food aggressive or not. Hopefully the one that you're working with, you found out if he's food aggressive or not. But a lot of owners don't really understand that. They're like, oh, why would I ever approach my dog if he has a cookie? Or, oh yeah, but not near other dogs. Why would he have a cookie near other dogs? Well, because he's in a room full of other dogs. So there are times where I look at it and go, not real sure it's safe in some environments and in some setups. And, like things like clickers, I know trainers are so into those darn clickers, and I did it for a long time. I was a clicker trainer for about 10 years, back in the mid-90s till about 2005. What I find is if you can hold the dog, move the dog around, use a comb, use scissors, use your clippers, all those other things, and manipulate a clicker and treats at the same time, you probably aren't listening to a podcast about how to handle dogs for grooming. Right? Like you're pretty elite there. That's a lot of skills going on all at the same time. Right? And if you really love clickers, I can show you how to do it with one of the raised button ones, and you can click with your foot. But really, it's cumbersome. It is really cumbersome to try to add treats to what we're already doing. So, I covered a lot of stuff today, didn't I? Well, I went a little bit over, but hopefully it was worth your while. So everybody, have a great week and stay curious. If you'd like more information, you can find me at chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group, Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast, or the Facebook page, Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you. If you're ready to go beyond the podcast, and I hope you do, I've made it really easy for you. If you go to creatinggreatgroomingdogs.com and click on your next step, you'll see all of the options. There's the Scholar Lounge community, there's the Modern Grooming Professional certification, there's Master Canine Stylist and Professional Canine Stylist diploma testings, there's the Behavior Lab for coaching and private one-on-one sessions with me, and of course, the Master Groomer Behavior Specialist program. So go to creatinggreatgroomingdogs.com and click on your next step.